Joining us is a man who is no stranger to the Observer. It's always a pleasure to have him on. Let me say a pleasant evening to Mr. Dave Tancoo. He's been working around the clock. Mr. Tancoo, welcome and good evening, sir.
Good evening, my friend. Good evening, Mikey. Good evening, my colleagues. Good evening to your listening audience as well. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here, to be given the opportunity to share some views.
Always a pleasure. I know you just heard economist Dr. Indira Sajiwan. I'm not here for doom and gloom. I mean, this is our blessed Twin Island Republic. This is our home, and we want what is best for it. But at this time, after 5 hours and 11 minutes of a presentation on Monday, we are simply not as well. Still, we're not clear as to how we're going to ride out this storm. Dr. Sajiwan said that, listen, there are things that are in place there to help, try to see if we can be insulated from all that is taking place until perhaps 2027. But then she says, listen, come 2027, that may not be enough time for a lot of these things to bear fruit. Where are we and what's happening exactly?
Mikey, I think it would be safe to say that we are in a crisis as a country. I think average citizens who live outside of the Whitehall and the Red House, average citizens who live outside of the Prime Minister's residence, who don't have private security around them all the time, are aware of how difficult life is. If you do a survey right now, you would find that the concerns that citizens have include crime, poverty, lack of jobs, poor infrastructure, those kinds of issues. Now, what is a budget supposed to do then? A budget is supposed to treat with the issues. It's supposed to raise funds and spend those funds towards the improvement of the quality and substance of life of the citizens. That's what a budget is supposed to do, and that's what a government's focus should be. We have had a government for the last 9, now going into the 10th year of office. And during that entire period, we have seen things get worse. Almost every single indicator, every single macroeconomic indicator has fallen between 2015 to today. And that is because of the direct policies that the government has implemented. And their policies have not changed. The policies we are seeing today are the same policies we saw over the last 9 years. So therefore, the results are going to be the same. It's going to be a continuation of the deterioration of the quality and standard of life of our average citizens.
I think one of the things that you said that really stood out to me is that you said that the PNM regime has not done anything in the last 9 years after wasting $500 billion. It will not be done in their last year as well. I mean, I think that's basic. I mean, you haven't done anything for almost 10 years, and now you're trying to sell us that you are actually going to put us on the right track, put us on the right path, and come 2027, once we hold on, once we tighten our belt, once we hold straight, everything is going to work out.
Haven't we heard all of this before? Haven't we heard the Prime Minister and the Minister say, hold straight, better times are coming? At one point in time, the Minister of Finance says, I can see clearly now, the clouds are gone, the sky is blue, etc., etc., etc. The Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister and this government are accustomed to gaslighting citizens. So this budget is exactly that. You had the Prime Minister come, I think, a couple of days before to tell citizens things are going to be rough until 2027. And then you had the Minister of Finance come and say, hey, things are great. We are doing exceptionally well. That conflict of views is not a conflict of views. It was an attempt to fool persons into getting frustrated and to getting scared about what the budget will bring. And then for the minister to come and try to create the illusion that things are not as bad. He's a magician. These things didn't happen by magic. You would recall too in the budget, even in budget debate, in the budget statement, sorry, the minister was boasting that the only time this country ever had a surplus was under PNM government. What he forgot to say that surplus had nothing to do with him. That surplus had to do with the fact that Russia and Ukraine went to war. And the price of energy products, the price of oil skyrocketed. And therefore, as soon as that high oil price ended in that 1 year, we went back into deficit. That tells you the quality of management, but that also tells you the tendency of the government, and especially the Minister of Finance in his budget, to misdirect, to mislead.
And I think one of the things that stood out too as well is when you said that Ilbert and the Prime Minister must change their priorities from making the rich richer to national, social, economic development for all citizens. And that has been it from day one. A selected group of people who feel it's their God-given right to have everything in this country, and the rest of us are just left to see how best we can keep our heads above water. Why is it that the administration is so out of sync with the reality that is taking place with citizens?
You remember when we had, well, two things. When we had a Minister of Health, unfortunately robbed at gunpoint.
Yes.
The minister was then recorded, interestingly enough, recorded having a conversation with somebody we believe to be a minister, a fellow minister, in which he was saying, I just called to tell you, this is the state that crime has gone in this country. I think he must be the only minister, the only person in this country who didn't know how bad crime was. It's the same with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is telling citizens, now is the time to band your belt, to band your belly, tighten your belt. Citizens have been living with the tightest of tight belts now for years. So I think the government simply is not aware. They're not living in the real world like the rest of us. They're simply not aware of the realities being faced by citizens, or they are aware and they do not care because they don't face those realities.
Yeah, the opposition leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad said there are no medium to long-term plans and measures in the budget that demonstrates that the government can re-establish a stable environment, uphold the rule of law, and foster economic diversification for Trinidad and Tobago. That's real.
That is absolutely true. You remember back in the days of a better government, we used to have long-term plans. We used to have long-term and medium-term plans, which shows the direction we were taking the country. I've raised this before here. If you want to develop tourism as a facility, as a revenue-generating entity, what you do is you train individuals in the various aspects of tourism, and you build the infrastructure, you build the hotels, etc. When we were in government, as the People's Partnership, as part of the People's Partnership, and UNC was in government, we were building schools to develop educational tourism, schools and the universities. We were building the stadia for the purpose of developing sport tourism. We were training, we had several courses dealing with training individuals who would occupy the various positions that would have opened up given those sorts of industries. That is how you develop over a period of time. So right now, when this government came in a decade ago, they shut down the development of the South Campus and the educational platforms that we were developing. They shut down even the hospitals that we were pursuing. The Cubas Children's Hospital is now it's a decoration for the Minister of Health. While we have people who cannot get medical services, those facilities were designed for long-term growth and development. That is how a party with a vision plans for the future. And you create employment as you're going forward to create more employment. That is just how it is supposed to work. These things are common sense. But this government is not inclined to do that. So what you have now is a minister who's treading water. And he's asking citizens, hold strain until 2027. What happens in 2027? Oil industry, the dragon gas comes on stream, etc. So we must survive until 2027. Isn't it ironic that he says 2027, which happens to be after the election, the general election?
Well, of course.
It's a misdirection, and they've done this time and again. The government has been in place now for 9, going on 10 years. They have spent more than $530 billion already, and they're going to spend another $60 billion now. And they have nothing to show for it. All the promises that they're talking about in this budget about the carbon footprint, eliminating the carbon footprint, etc., etc. That too is an example. We have situations with the agricultural sector where the agricultural sector is in crisis. They have poor infrastructure, etc., right? Poor infrastructure, poor marketing facilities, pre-deal last name, left, right, and center. Farmers are complaining about these very same things. Instead, what this government is telling they're going to do, they're going to digitize the farmers' arrangements. They're going to come in and give the farmers digital platforms so that the farmers can pay their dues and their bills and so on. Farmers need to get what farmers need. And the farmers are telling them what they need. They need pre-deal last name score to get involved. They need security.
Yeah.
They need better infrastructure. They are saying what they need. And that same thing is true across every industry in Trinidad and Tobago.
What
People are
also
telling
stood
them what
out
they
here,
need.
Mr. Tancoo, is $10 million for the EBC. Electronic voting, added to that, it would be a new election management system. One would think that all that has taken place with the EBC and this administration, they would have tried to restore the integrity and trust of that institution, rather than saying, listen, we're going to go a different route, and we're going to have these things coming here, and we're going to use them for the election. $10 million. I mean, what are we looking at here?
And you know, the irony of that is a good point you raised. The irony of that is we people tend to forget that that this was the same EBC which extended illegally the voting hours. So it's not unusual for the EBC to act outside of its remit. But to make changes as we speak now, and the Prime Minister so vehemently against the bringing in of international observers, why is it that whenever it comes to things like transparency and accountability, this government hides, runs, and accuses and abuses anyone who tries to do it otherwise? From the Auditor General, come all the way back.
Yeah, this EBC thing, and I'm sure the opposition is going to be looking at that very seriously, as well as over the July-August holiday vacation, we were told that there was no money, of course, for remedial repairs and what have you for schools. Now there's 19 million, and they are going to be termed as emergency projects, which means they can circumvent the entire tendering process or procurement process, as the case may be. Are we seeing where they have set up many slush funds now going into the election?
I heard that you asked in the same question. My answer will be probably along the same lines. The money exists. The money has always existed. What this government lacks is a maintenance framework. They buy boats. They buy facilities, they buy boats, and those boats are packed up awaiting repairs while people could come in and out of our borders with guns, drugs, and anything else that they want. They build structures, they build hospitals, etc. They do not maintain them. There's no maintenance program for anything that this government has. The plan, though, is clear. The plan is always for the purpose of emergency works, so that they would not fix the rivers and the drains. In my constituency, for example, they would not clear the rivers and the drains. They would not ensure that the water courses are clear, so that we do not have, so that we have quick water runoff. They leave it until we have a flooding episode, and then suddenly you see all these pieces of equipment come down, willing to work. When the government has to pay then these emergency mobilization costs, this is all a money-making exercise. The government's intent has always been to bypass the procurement legislation, and they've successfully done that by extracting the core substance. They've removed billions of dollars from the procurement officer, the procurement regulators' oversight. And then even when they put it in place now, they put that toothless bulldog law in place. They put the law in place now. They're still not following the law. $5 billion per year. $5 billion last year only. $5 billion in contracts that were given by sole select tender. Somebody just walks in and somebody else says, listen, here's a contract. Here's another one. Here's another one. Total of $5 billion without public procurement oversight. That is a major offense. But that is because this is how the government operates. They are not interested in accounting. They're interested in bypassing the accounting so that they create these feeder funds. They create these nests so that they can campaign using funds gotten via this kind of allocation. By the way, that is the kind of money that we would have liked to see the government spend on raising old age pension and social grants, the value of those things. Because the minister said that, we know things are bad, we know things are difficult, and we will horse train, we will raise this in 2027. They will not raise it in 2027. They will be out of government by 2027, and it will fall to another government to do it from next year. But the point is that even when it comes to improving the quality of lives of the elderly, of those on disability, of those who have children with Down syndrome, etc., who receive social support grants, the minister is telling them, you hold strain, don't worry, hold strain. Inflation prices are going up every single day. But he's telling those who are least able to afford it, that would be those persons who are on fixed incomes, to hold strain.
Yeah, there was a lot of mention
This is
about...
a heartless government, my friend.
And I agree with you, because there was a lot of mention about, again, as I told Dr. Sajuan, about the most vulnerable and what have you. A lot of mention about it, but again, there were no programs to actually say that were going to be implemented to help these individuals. And I got to ask you this, of course, what do you feel was the biggest thing that was omitted, out of all of this, that just was not there, or the true meat of it, that just simply was not in that presentation?
The biggest issue facing Trinidad and Tobago now is crime. And the Minister of Finance, his solution is to promise 2,000 cars over 3 years and some cameras. That is his solution. Crime, we all know, we've all said it, is a multifaceted problem, but it impacts every single aspect of our country. It affects the GDP because businesses are no longer interested in coming to invest in Trinidad and Tobago. When that happens, it impacts employment. It impacts contributions via taxes to the government, via the NIB, so that we could boost the National Insurance Fund. It impacts every single aspect of our country. Crime. And this minister bypassed it. It's like I said, they live in this dolly house with private security, etc. They are not aware of the realities that are outside there, facing average citizens every day, petrified to live even in your own home. Petrified because the government ministers do not have that problem, or they do not care. And I honestly believe that they don't care. They believe their own rhetoric, and based on the rhetoric of the ministers, things are fine. I saw the news day today. The news day today, the Minister of Finance spoke at some event yesterday telling everybody that people are happy. People are seeing change and are growing, and people are happy. I don't know where he's living.
I ask myself the same thing. How do they get away with this? When in fact that you have wiped out the middle class. People who had 2 cars as a family are down basically maybe to 1 or even none. And some are even renting it out on the sideline, trying to make ends meet. And yet still the voices of the people, and I think at this point in time people will have to say that the UNC's move for that pre-budget consultation, for those who didn't understand, they understand clearly now what it meant and how important it is. Because none of that was presented on Monday reflected that this government is in sync with what is happening to the citizens in this country. I mean, property tax, he spoke about without getting into it, but we know it's a matter of timing. They wanted us to settle before they look at those increase in rates, whether it be TNTech and WASA, and whatever taxes are coming next. Because again, there is no medium or long-term plan to generate revenue, to have some sort of sustainable development taking place.
The government has put all their eggs in one basket. That is the dragon gas. That's a deal with Venezuela. All their eggs are there, to the exclusion of anything else. They're not even trying to develop new industries. They are focused only and solely on dragon gas, which is why the minister and the prime minister is saying, wait until 2027, when they think that dragon gas will yield some gas to Trinidad and Tobago. But even then, they will come back and say, well, the existing gas producers in our country have dropped because gas production has dropped by more than 1/3. So that even when we get to 2027, if there is some arrangement where we get gas, if Venezuela doesn't collapse, if the US doesn't impose even more sanctions against Venezuela, if, then we go back to being 100% reliant on oil and gas. in a market that we do not control. We depend on international agencies to set the price of oil and gas. And gas right now and oil are depleting reserves. The rest of the world, substantial amounts of the rest of the world are going to new energy sources away from oil and gas. Oil and gas will be here for a while. But until we realize that we can't depend totally on one sector, what we do is we put a strain on the pockets of the tax-paying citizens because the government has to pinch their pockets. And while he's telling citizens to hold strain, you know what the Minister of Finance is doing? Property tax, take that. Increase in electricity rates, take that, because it's coming. And a higher property tax is coming. Increase in NIS contributions, take that, that is coming too. Increase in water rates, take that, that is coming too. A continuous increase in the price of fuel, that is coming too. Continuous increase in the price of food and other project healthcare, all of that is coming too. And he's telling you, hold on, you just hold on.
Wow.
How are we to hold on when our spending power is being depleted and the government is not even trying to improve other conditions? The government is telling you we are spending money here, we're spending $60 billion of your money. Given our track record, we know things are going to get worse. We're going to spend the money anyway because we just have to live in hope, dreaming that tomorrow we will get this overflow of oil and gas from another country.
So
we are not even depending on developing our own resources, you know. We are planning on developing somebody else's resources on a license. And if Venezuela decides, you know what, I'm not interested in Trinidad and Tobago, and they shut it off, it's done. We would have spent more than $500 billion and not develop our local economy to our disadvantage. You know what this reminds me of, Mikey?
Tell me.
The NGC used to provide condensation facilities to BP. BP increase their output and increase their demand for this condensation facilities. It doesn't matter how to describe it, but the point is that BP had a product and BP had a demand. NGC saw that BP had a demand and invested $400 million in creating what was the Beachfield project, in buying equipment and putting the infrastructure in place, only to find out after they would have spent $400 million that BP Amoco went ahead and built its own facility.
Wow.
The government, that is, so now NGC is like the government. And that's the same, by the way, the same gentleman that was given a national award for his contribution to the country. Same gentleman, because that's how this government operates. The balance there is that the government does not see past, they invest in things without prior consideration, without prior thought, and they stay narrow-minded focus on it to the exclusion of everything else. And while that is happening, our agricultural sector is collapsing, our tourism sector is collapsing, sports is collapsing, every single other entity, except, and I want to speak up a few seconds for that, except for some aspects of the manufacturing sector. The government is boasting about the manufacturing, non-oil manufacturing sector is growing. Look around, Mikey. The non-oil manufacturing sector is growing in terms of output, fact. But you know why that is so? Because they have now polarized that entire sector into the hands of a few producers. Those few people who can get foreign exchange, those few conglomerates, those are the entities that have their hands in everything. We have maybe one or two major players in importing every single drug that's sold in the drugstores, every single one, maybe right. One or two players, big players, right. That are involved in bringing those things in.
There's a monopoly on that. There's a monopoly.
Sorry?
There's a monopoly on that, you're right.
There's a monopoly across the board on almost every single product, including agricultural production.
That's right.
We import 96% of the staples that we consume in Trinidad and Tobago, 96%. Who do you think imports that? That is not you and I. That is a conglomerate that is generating foreign exchange, that is spending foreign exchange, that is getting foreign exchange. That is why the foreign exchange cabal in this country continues to operate, because the government has facilitated them, and now they have grown and taken over, they eclipse small and medium-sized businesses, which is why the government does not care about the small and medium players, they don't care about the middle class. Because as soon as you come up with a good idea, a bigger player will come in and usurp it from you. When we had persons who were importing clothing in this country, we were importing clothing using our credit card. The same clothing you could go in a store and have to pay twice as much for. The government introduced a tax on these purchases. Now you know with the tax, you can't afford to buy the clothing. You have to go to the store to buy the clothing. But those are still the same imported clothing. The government is biased. Do you know that there's a tax on pasta? The importation of pasta. And do you know why? Because there's a local manufacturer of pasta who the government is protecting. So we would have been able to and that's the thing. The government doesn't need to tell you that. The government doesn't need to indicate who have gotten tax concessions and which concessions they have been given. The government continues to operate, but they are protecting and promoting certain business interests, which has resulted in the polarization of our country and a polarization of our business class.
Wow. I want to thank you so much for taking time out. I mean, it seems as though we're living on promises here. It seems that Dr. Rowley did, of course, succeed in what he said, and that was to make the rich richer. You're correct. It's a monopoly across the board. We have one company that is bringing pharmaceutical items into this country. One. Spoke about it right here with veteran journalist Ken Ali. He wrote about it. We spoke about it. And again, the rich continues to get richer, and while the rest of us continue to simply go down the economic ladder. Very unfortunate.
You know, once we have a monopoly, what happens? Once there's a monopoly, there's a price control, and the person who is in charge can charge any price they want.
That's right.
The supplier controls the price, and then devil finds the hindmost.
Thank you again. Keep up the good work. We'll be checking in with you periodically. I know you've got a lot on your hands to deal with, but thanks again being here on The Observer. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Mikey, for the opportunity. God bless you.